I've been walking a lot recently. Sometimes it's in the company of friends, other times it's simply for the thrill of the game. The most frequent time I go out is at the dead of night, the stillness of a world where only one or two cars pass by in the span of 30 minutes or so, a comfortable contrast to the constant bustle of the daytime. Down dark corners and streets where the low light tends to trick my mind into seeing creatures, I've become a bit more accustomed to the thought that, though it is doubtlessly populated, it exists solely for me, just for a little bit. This is the most I've probably ever gotten out in my entire life, honestly. Outside play became an irregularity for me almost as early as the age of 9. Moving to the middle of rural nowhere will do that for you. And struggle as I might against the strain of 1 megabyte per second download speed, thanks AT&T, I remained in that space between internet access and dangling silence as late as my early 20s. It's been close to 2 years since I left my parents' house, localized in a slightly more busy community than I was during the span I just described, but still quite a bit more remote than where I've been taking up residence. The dull ache of sitting listlessly in rooms I'd covered every square inch of hundreds of times became a stark reminder of just how much of my life I've spent in front of illuminated monitors, bathing every boxed-in corner in a cool moonlight from which I've found both my greatest comforts and my darkest fears. Why, when I'm surrounded by life, would I continue to stare into the void of an internet that often feels as if day after day it grows colder and more impersonal, ready to toss me to the gutter over the very vulnerability it taught me to espouse? Last summer, I returned home for a couple of weeks, give or take. It was the most in company I've ever been there, and yet only in my lonesome there did I decide to watch something I've been putting off checking out for a while. This, of course, was director Satoshi Kon's much-lauded masterpiece, Perfect Blue. Perfect Blue is a 1997 film based very loosely on a book, Perfect Blue: Complete Metamorphosis, written and released in 1991 by writer Yoshikazu Takeuchi. The film follows Mima Kirigoe, a pop idol turned actress who has recently pivoted the direction of her career and faces many bizarre challenges along the way as a result. A violent stalker, a mounting sense of pressure to perform in ways she's not comfortable, and of course, the internet. A website pops up onto Mima's radar during this tumultuous time in her life, a site that purports to have Mima's own thoughts and feelings transcribed onto their pages. Day-to-day entries chronicle her every move with alarming specificity. And yet, though she does not remember writing these posts, does not believe the sentiments they proclaim, Mima finds herself horrified by the blurring line between what she believes to be her sincere self and the misaligning view others have created of her. This website is called Mima's Room, and though Mima herself is inarguably the focus of the film, the website, I believe, is one of its strongest backdrops, just as tangibly horrifying as any film set or crowded hallway it lingers in. My earliest memories of community were fostered by the internet. Somewhat loose access to it funneled me toward rudimentary InVision-free forums when I was about as young as 6, talking to strangers about Sonic the Hedgehog on AOL Instant Messenger, and promptly having one of those strangers blocked by my mother when I slipped and talked about the state I lived in.
And you lost a relationship because of this?
A potential relationship.
Thankfully, that friend was not a stalker or worse. The internet stranger danger boom of the late 90s and early 2000s was a widespread mentality which, for those unfamiliar to the ways in which the web would continue to shape the world, certainly had its convincing hooks. I later found out that this person was indeed my age, and as far as I've last heard, she was married several years ago. It's funny how things like that happen. Even though I've never seen a vast majority of the people I've met online in person, they always have carried a sense of tangibility, felt and sculpted behind years of chat logs and crusty JPEGs of anime girl icons. My first dabbles into any serious form of dating were when I, as a stupid teenager, was caught up in the whirlwind of late-night rally and town sessions on Gaia Online, a juggernaut of Western anime knockoff pastiche which I would argue had just as many people spewing pejoratives as it did chibi artwork. There, anyone could make their own similarly old-looking webpage localized entirely within their profile. Swamped with blingies and MySpace music players, we used our avatars to cosplay Full Metal Alchemist, dropped Paramore lyrics in our signatures, and all was well. Or, well, it wasn't, probably, but it was familiar. The evolution of the internet has been an interesting thing to watch for this reason. Quaint social spaces went to die with the advent of centralized social media, and the slow rattling gasps of cable meant that entertainment in and of itself began to be swallowed by the internet with the passage of time. What once began as compressed chain email videos of screamers evolved into the winding roads of newgrounds, WebM video sites, and eventually places like Google Video and YouTube. Streaming came rapidly into the picture through places like Justin TV and eventually Twitch, and though the world seemed to expand before our eyes, the internet slowly became narrower and narrower, less like a Wild West, and more like a box. This box sits unassumingly in the corner of your room, never quite leaving. Whether it be through your PC or phone, it's always within reach. It's no longer a place, and because it's not a place you can no longer visit, it's just there. To say that Perfect Blue captured a lot of the esoteric fears I feel surrounding this sensation would be putting it lightly, I suppose. Sure, this film is about far more than the internet. In fact, I'd say the internet plays a somewhat small part in the film compared to its other, more prominent aspects, but what it's used to communicate within the film is both evocative and important, and I would argue that it sparked thoughts in me that act as such a perfect microcosm of what the film actually is about. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's set the stage a little bit, or continue to do so. This is all going somewhere, so bear with me. At the risk of skirting along the line of the typical video essay recap, I need to go over what actually happens in the film, as while despite how harrowing it is, I would heartily recommend viewers actually watch the film before this video. I know that on YouTube this isn't exactly always going to be the case. I myself am guilty of this too, so given that a lot of the video's backbone will lie within the context of what happens in this movie, I'm going to need to provide that context as a baseline so that we're all on the same page going forward, okay? Okay. Also, here's a time code if you've already seen the movie and you just want to skip past that part. So, Mima Kirigoe is our main character. After a long tenure with her idol group Cham, composed of herself and two other members, Rei and Yukiko, she decides to become an actress. Many of her fans are, as you might guess, disappointed by this change, both because of their dedication to Cham as a unit, and because Mima's image is changing. Mima occupies a very specific, curated, parasocial construct to a lot of these people. And so, her expressing any degree of individuality or choice is something that destroys that illusion, which is just a bit too much for many of them. Chief among them is an obsessive fan who goes by the moniker of Me-Mania. Me-Mania had previously been assaulted by a group of guys looking to make trouble at one of Cham's concerts, who, already obsessed with Mima, began to think of himself as having a deeper connection with her when she spoke out on his behalf. This leads to Mima being sent strange and threatening faxes, as well as discovering the aforementioned Mima's Room website after she's introduced to the internet by her manager, Rumi Hidaka, who is herself a former idol. Trying to broaden her creative horizons, Mima's cast in a television production, a drama series and murder mystery called Double Bind. At first, her role is relatively minor, only earning a few lines here and there, one of which being the haunting and recurring which echoes throughout the film as a thematic fulcrum of the work. In order to secure a larger role, Mima is proposed, and somewhat pressured, to perform a scene in which she is assaulted. Rumi is totally against this, and while Mima herself is clearly uncomfortable, she feels the weight of show business in action as her meager resistance is met with a deluge of insistences and promises of further fame, to which she reluctantly acquiesces. Filming this scene inevitably causes her, well, saying mental anguish would be a bit too pleasant, honestly. She literally begins seeing reflections of herself in an old idol outfit, which claims to be the real her, parroting the words of Mima's Room, as well as telling Mima that she's been defiled, is dirty, and cannot embody the image people want from her. The days blur together. A bomb threat is carried out against her agent. Fiction and reality distort and twist as her time on set and her time at home mingle in a way that Mima herself can't quite delineate clearly. From here, things quite quickly spiral out of control. Made to model for illicit pictures, Mima can't even trust her own memory anymore, when people involved with her burgeoning acting career, including the photographer, are brutally murdered. The latter scene is one of the most disturbingly enrapturing displays of visual storytelling I've ever seen, depicting what, at the time, appears to be Mima, lumbering over the man as he writhes on the ground, slamming a blade in repeatedly and drenching herself in red as behind her, the picture-perfect Mima that everybody wants is literally projected on the wall. The final twist of the television show she stars in seems to imply the culprit, now played by Mima herself, was spurred into her murders as a result of trauma, given a dissociative disorder which leaves her convinced that she is someone she isn't, and that her crimes are merely fiction. This for a bit is played as something of a fake-out, letting the audience wonder if everything they knew about Mima up until this point was itself an illusion of her mind. But this isn't quite the case. The truth comes to light fairly soon after, when Mima's stalker tries to corner and kill her, evidently on the instruction of who he calls the real Mima. This real Mima actually turns out to be Rumi, who not only set up the Mima's Room website, not only committed all the murders, not only set up her home to look basically identical to Mima's apartment, but is actually the one with a dissociative disorder, literally convincing her that she is Mima herself. I have slightly mixed feelings about how this is depicted from a literal perspective, but at least in terms of the intended metaphorical purpose of all of this, I understand what Kohn is trying to do, and for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be focusing a bit more on that, so bear with me. Rumi is someone who, as previously discussed, had been an idol herself after all. However, after a lifetime passed her by and her youth shrank away, she was shuffled to the sidelines, no longer able to achieve her dreams of idol life and instead having to live vicariously through the girls she managed. Unfortunately, though she saw a kindred spirit in Mima, Mima was her own person with goals and desires that stretched beyond what Rumi herself wanted. When she left the idol business and began to pursue acting, led down that twisting road with its own set of challenges and pressures, Rumi began to see Mima's image, something she helped to curate, as dirtied and wrong. Not the Mima she knew, nor the Mima she wanted. The dissonance and decay has let something fester in Rumi, amalgamating and emerging as this introjection, this internalization made manifest which seeks to destroy that which she doesn't understand, and replace it with something she does. A chase ensues between the two, where Rumi fiercely tries to kill Mima, however, she's accidentally impaled on glass, then stumbles into the street where she's almost run over, basking in the light of a barreling truck, as if it were the lights of a stage. Her life is narrowly saved by Mima, though while she herself is able to recover somewhat from her experiences, Rumi is hospitalized, where she will most likely always remain believing in the image of herself, of Mima, that she created. Mima, having visited incognito, gets in her car and smiles to herself, saying that she is real. And that is the end of Perfect Blue. I trust that even with this brief description, I don't have to do much to describe why this film struck me in a place that made me feel sick to my stomach. Even minor perceivability on the internet is something of such stark contrast to staying under the radar that a film so centrally determined to interrogate the degradation of boundaries and perception was almost perfectly poised to give me a panic attack. All during its runtime, I was captivated, sitting silent on my parents' couch with a hand over my mouth and knees huddled to my chest as I repeatedly found myself thinking one of two things: leave her alone, and oh, I get it. To be clear, this isn't a statement that pertains even very specifically to fame, by the way. I haven't even been sent one of those fancy YouTube plates yet. I think it's safe to say that calling myself famous would be far and away pretty presumptuous. But it doesn't need to be about fame to still be perfectly terrifying in a way that picks at my brain, as even a minorly successful creator. This is because, to the credit of Satoshi Kon, he wasn't making it with that message in mind either. To quote him on this,
I think it is a problem everybody has, male or female, famous or anonymous. I mean, there's a gap between the image people see of me and what I see of myself. Perfect Blue is about the tragedy caused by that gap becoming too large.
And that description really struck me. The tragedy caused by that gap becoming too large. It's a simultaneous acknowledgement that there will always exist a gap between how people see us and how we see ourselves, while also implying that for a person's health, that gap must be kept slightly narrow enough to provide a comfort of proximity. We as people will never be able to reveal our full selves to a person in a way that communicates everything we feel, explains and conveys everything we are, but in communicating to others, we try to impart enough of ourselves that we are understood. When enough people do not understand or refuse to understand us, that dissonance of self yawns open and begins to swallow us whole. Sometimes we ask people who they are, they tell us, and we respond, "No, you aren't." And inside of our minds, if not theirs, a metamorphosis begins.
So I think it's kind of become abundantly clear to me. I mean, even very early on into the making and conception of this video as it is, and I think it's probably become abundantly clear pretty quickly in watching it, that it's sort of a bit of an unfocused ping pong into a bunch of different directions, which are essentially sculpting a very loose narrative around sort of my own thoughts and feelings. It's not that I'm unconfident in that idea, or being like vulnerable or whatever, or like conveying that in an artistic sense. But I don't know, I think like there's always like whenever I make something and I have a very particular idea of how I want to do it, I feel like there's like this immediate sort of like knee-jerk reaction that I have a lot of the time, where I'm like, my intention needs to be understood. But the thing with that is that like that's not something that you can ever really very consistently predict. You don't know how people are going to engage with your work. You don't know what they're going to take from it. You don't know what they're going to bring to it that leads to what they take from it. So, I mean, in a very real sense, I'm sure to a lot of people out there, like, this is just sort of like self-indulgent, like, who gives a shit garbage. And I mean, maybe it is, but I would rather make 1,000 self-indulgent who gives a shit garbage videos that only appeal to me specifically, if we're just talking in a purely artistic sense, than make 1,000 like safe, digestible, like completely flattened videos where I have absolutely no stake in what I'm saying, if that makes sense. Because there are so many safe formats that you can find on a platform like this, which encourages just pumping out constantly, that if you do that and you find a rhythm for it and you really like just churn away at that thing for however long, then you will be rewarded for it. And it's not like I'm a stranger to the way that that functions. But at the same time, it's like I can't complain that people do that necessarily. I can't say, don't get your bag. If you told me when I was a kid that, you know, oh, you'd be living in a house with your friends, that you are able to afford rent because you make videos on the internet about things that you care about, I would think that that was insane. I would do anything in my power to make sure that I got to the point where I'm living the life that I live now. And here I am, melting into a pot of soup, and not even very good soup, under this just like completely abyssal pressure of some abstract sort of like standard that I set for myself all the time. And maybe that will come back to me in some way, in some interpretable way, where this doesn't feel like noise that I'm just expelling out of my mouth for the hell of it, that actually feels like a human reaction, that actually feels like something that can be validated by other people. But then isn't that also kind of the crux of the problem? Like, why do you have to be validated by other people? And even if you are validated by other people, how can you guarantee that they actually are validating you, if not just this incredibly specific vision of you? Because it goes both ways, doesn't it? Like, who am I talking to right now?
A little short story that has stuck with me for many years now is one I actually briefly discussed on this channel before, The Nightmare of Fabrication. The Nightmare of Fabrication is a short, full-color manga chapter by Yoshitoshi Abe, which is itself part of the Serial Experiments Lane multimedia series, and was published in an art book called Omnipresence in the Wired. There is a lot going on in the short length of this one-shot, not all of which I need to get into here to make my point, but the beginning is the most prescient part. The main character, Lane, is experiencing some pretty heavy isolation and depersonalization. She doesn't know what of her memories are real or fake, and her connections with others seem both tenuous and fleeting. Something she swears is real but can't quite recall the finer details of. In an attempt to stop isolating, Lane cuts open a plush doll named Bike-chan to attempt to implant a rudimentary AI into. This AI is itself a test drive she claims will be used to recreate people in her life that she's disconnected from, which will allow her to connect with others again. This falls apart when Bike-chan's parts fail and the plush explodes. Here, Lane's failure is underlined by an unspoken but nagging fear that exists in all stories like this to me. Lane attempts to grant free will and sentience to an object without any, turning it into a person, but at the same time she desires for it to treat her kindly, to love her, and to be enthused by her company. These two things, however, do not really intersect. These models of thought cannot meet in the middle. To grant individuality is to accept that you cannot make somebody the way you want them to be, cannot force them to feel a certain way about you or act in a certain manner. To do so would be to strip them of their choice, and then, even if they were to make the decisions that you wanted, feel the way you hoped, those feelings and choices would ultimately ring hollow. How can someone love you, after all, if you bring them into the world with the notion that they must? If they don't have the capacity to choose that love, then that love is no better than an illusion, a role play, playing with dolls. In much the same way, Rumi embodies this mindset in Perfect Blue, I think. She oversees the trajectory of Mima's career, and within this position, she manages to find something of a comfort with what that represents to her. She may not be able to achieve her dreams directly anymore, but Mima is somebody who can, and if Rumi can orchestrate those successes, that trajectory, then she can enjoy the accomplishment as if it were her own, even though she can no longer serve the same role. But Mima is a person. She isn't just a canvas that Rumi can project her dreams onto. Mima chooses to do things that buck against Rumi's own desires, and in the process, that notion of unconditional love is shattered. Without even knowing that her manager has staked her entire stability on a path through life she isn't even certain she wants to follow, Mima's attempting to grasp onto an individual image that she is in control of. But as an idol, as a celebrity, she is already beholden to thousands of people's expectations, with Rumi being the sort of congealed avatar of them all. She gives voice to the most entitled among them, literally inserting herself into Mima's life, specifically to decry her choices as illegitimate, not only to disempower her, but to force her to do as people want, regardless of what she wants. Let me tell you about one of my favorite voice actresses, speaking of celebrity culture. Her name is Aya Hirano, and chances are you've probably encountered her work somewhere in the wild. In addition to voicing many iconic anime characters like Haruhi Suzumiya, Konata Izumi, Misa Amane, and hey, look at that, Monica from Danganronpa 2, I can never escape it. She is also a very successful singer. She began her acting career at the age of 14, and broke into singing only a year later in 2002. Rosy days, however, did not last for Hirano. Around 2010 or so, she encountered waves of criticism and harassment from former fans. She was becoming a bit more open about how she'd been dating, and got into a scandal the following year surrounding her relations with several band members, resulting in her dismissal from the music group Lantis. Fans chewed her up and spit her out for this, pretty vehemently. She was already being called a sellout for moving away from voice acting work, and the image people had crafted for her being betrayed was the final straw for many. We're talking broken CDs, burnt shirts, the whole 9 yards. Oh, and don't forget the death threats. The many, many death threats. To this day, Hirano is open about the fact that taking roles in anime results in a reignition of threats being sent to her, meaning the trend has essentially never died down. Aya Hirano carved out a place in the entertainment industry, but when the gap between her perception of herself and fans' perception of her grew too large, what do you know, it got ugly. But she's only one of many, many examples of this in action. Perfect Blue didn't exactly spawn from a vacuum, you know. It's no secret that Japan's idol culture has been heavily criticized, and though it has recently shown encouraging signs of getting better, at least on the end of fan behavior, it's still important to reflect on and learn from it in this context. A lot of the criticism of the idol industry over the years has come down to two main factors: objectification and coercion. Fans are sold a fantasy of accessibility to idols, encouraged by signing and handshake events. Many idols are forbidden from dating or getting married by their agencies, and these are often very young girls to boot. Most female idols are expected to graduate from the profession by the age of 20, as if they're already considered too old for it by then. Which takes on a bit of an uncomfortable connotation when you remember these restrictions. In fact, a former member of AKB48 literally was demoted from her position in the band for spending a night with a boy. She then had to appear in a video with a shaved head, apologizing profusely for this. Let's not even get into the swimsuit issues, the photo shoots, or the extreme conditions many idols are forced to work in either. An article by the Japan Times in 2017 regarding a survey conducted by the Japanese Patent Office reported that nearly 27% of idols signed with talent agencies, of 197 women polled, claimed to have been pressured to record or photograph things of an adult nature, often blindsided by it entirely. Now, sure, that is a pretty small sample size, I'll grant you, but it's still not exactly encouraging to hear, is it? Idol anime paints a somewhat rosy image of the profession, and for what it's worth, this isn't at all to imply that the business has produced nothing positive. Idols often are poised to essentially sell people positivity and dreams, a way to escape from their heavy lives and aspire to things. I don't doubt that to many people this means a lot, and that many idols themselves probably feel a great attachment to their work and that time in their lives. Many of them seem to come out of these experiences just fine, perhaps not even encountering any of the things I've just described. If that's the case, good. They deserve that peace of mind, and personally, I see why the concept of idol groups is such a popular one, and why it's persisted for so long. But with any industry, of course, comes aspects worth criticizing. Some industries being more guilty than others, and if the idol business is going to continue trying to do the best that it can, it needs to treat those idols themselves with humanity. We definitely can't let ourselves get complacent about it, and for the Mimas of the world, that holds especially important. But we all know that idols aren't the beginning and end of this issue. Parasocial behavior has long been the sticking point of many a piece of media and media discussion, regardless of its country of origin. Japan is far from the only place that has dealt with issues like this. In the age of the internet, where literally anyone with a bit of elbow grease and luck can become a celebrity too, this is even more readily apparent. In just the course of a year or so, someone with enough talent who happens to hit the algorithm correctly can go from a complete rando online to being swamped with newly excited fans. This can be a good thing, of course. People expressing themselves? Hell yeah. People being able to make a living from that self-expression? That's awesome. However, the ever-quickening erosion of boundaries between those creators and the people who come up around their work? Yeah, I don't know about that. The moment you begin to expect people to be who you want them to be rather than who they themselves want to be, that's going to cause some domino effects, especially if a crowd being married to that idea means the person feels trapped by those expectations. I guess in a way, Me-Mania is one of the film's most scathing indictments of this mentality, too. Sure, he's manipulated by Rumi, but his own biases and view of Mima herself are what make him susceptible to that manipulation. And as awful as he gets by the end, it's somewhat interesting to see how the story takes pains, small as they may be, to set up at least partially how he came to be the way he is. We don't have the full context. Kohn even specifically said giving too much context would be wrong for the intent of his character. But I think the beginning of the film kinda says everything it needs to about him, doesn't it? Mima herself sticks her neck out for him as an individual, which makes him feel valued as more than a fan, but as a person. When he's attacked, she rightly chastises those doing it, and in that perfect serendipitous little moment, he feels as if he's been validated by the person he's dreamed of for so long. Only, therein lies the issue, right? The person he dreams of is not necessarily the person herself. He puts all of his stake, all of his perception of her as a person into the personal image he's cultivated. When Mima betrays those expectations, though, steps outside of the way he perceives her, she becomes alien to him. She's never operated as an actual person within his view, even though he was so desperate for her to see him as one. He ascribes such significance to a minor interaction, one she may not even remember because he's formed such a strong attachment to the Mima in his mind that he believes there's something more to their relationship, and therefore, by extension, he's owed the kind of depth of consideration, the kind of consistency from Mima that one would expect from someone genuinely close to them. But Mima is on an elevated stage, an invisible barrier erected between them, not unlike a funhouse mirror. The image from the outside is warped when compared to what lies on the inside, and the way he lashes out, the way he attacks her for not being what he wants, this is sadly all too common, both within and outside the parameters of fame. It would be wrong to deny the inside of those parameters, though. Their significance on this film's story, intentionally or otherwise, is something largely felt by a majority of people who watch it. I'd say that's obviously for a good reason. Interestingly enough, in terms of the cultural moment, the most fitting current companion piece to Perfect Blue is one I'd argue, at a surface level, doesn't appear to be very similar to it.
Hi. Welcome to whatever this is.
Bo Burnham's Inside is, okay, hold on, stop, please, hear me out. Yes, I know I talked about Inside once before already. It can be relevant twice. Inside is a special that for a while now has taken up residence in my brain. Having rewatched it recently, I don't think that all of it holds up. It has its eye rollers. It's a very angry piece of film for sure. But for what it's worth, I still understand where it's coming from. To a certain extent, while not exclusively, it is a follow-up to the end of Burnham's previous special, Make Happy, where his parody of auto-tune outro songs turns into a frank examination of his anxieties surrounding performance, and the audience that has come up around him in such a short amount of time. A part of me loves you, a part of me hates you, a part of me needs you, a part of me fears you. It's a haunting little refrain that, when paired with the music, makes for something digestible and thought-provoking, but also catchy and prone to burial. This follow-up chronicles, essentially, the process of Burnham trying to simultaneously write something new, and in the style his fans expect and will want, while also surrounded by said process and isolated within it. Unable to perform outside due to the ongoing pandemic, he's forced to perform exclusively for camera, and though he does find creative workarounds for this, the isolation makes him much more invested in the nitty-gritty of parasocial perception, much more put upon by it, and the lack of external stimuli combined with his already present fears about performance begin to push him even further into the corner than he'd already been years prior. It's barely even a little subtle to see him slowly trickle down from songs about Instagram or calling his mom, to grim admissions of his fear of stagnation, his struggles with his mental health, his visible agitation at not delivering something exactly the way he wants to, all the way down to the film's most striking visual, Burnham himself exiting into the light outside similar to the end of Make Happy, but instead of finding a vista away from his work that comforts him, he finds himself on yet another set. The awareness of his endless torment for the sake of someone else's entertainment drives him to desperately try escaping back into irrelevance, only to find that he's literally not allowed to be a private figure anymore. Overwhelmed by the enormity of that realization, he can only crumple and cry, while a copy of himself watches this projected on a screen and smiles. It's a visual nearly as harrowing to me as Mima's conflicting selves in that scene with the photographer, even if, of course, that's Rumi doing the killing. To someone who's never dealt with being hyper-visible, this may seem like a staggeringly first-world problem to have, but I think the level of someone's success is irrelevant when it comes to measuring this. After all, it isn't about your success or your money, it's about perception, a health of soul, of having yourself be at least halfway recognizable as yourself, instead of a set of traits people associate broadly with you and then try to force you into. Burnham's song and dance routines in Inside, to me, feel so largely narratively disjointed because they're precisely about that very frustration of trying to fit yourself into someone else's mold. Even with unlimited time and plenty of money, Bo suffers while trying to make exactly what people want, because it may not exactly be what he wants. Clearly, he still wants to perform, but another part of him wants to get away from people's expectations, to stop overthinking every little thing that he says and does, knowing that it will be scrutinized by thousands that will never meet him.
You know, that's part of the gamble of what performing is. It's meant to be interpreted in any way it can.
Ultimately, these things unravel and never quite properly coalesce because their holistic coherence doesn't really form when they're all the result of trying to please a crowd. And I love it for that, don't get me wrong, it's just something that really sticks out to me about Inside on a revisit. Every time I felt myself pound my head against a wall trying to make a script happen, I really felt that specific frustration being reflected back at me in this film. You want to say something on your own, but you know what people expect you to say, and if you veer too far from that, there is a constant overwhelming fear that betraying expectations will ruin you. As we've already discussed, when people feel entitled to their perception of you, it can be difficult to escape that, even when you would think it was obviously a negative thing. I don't mean to throw myself a pity party here either, though. I'm sure tons of people would kill to be in the position I'm in many ways. But when people begin to see you as a set of ideas rather than as an individual, that can be pretty terrifying. Bo Burnham isn't just funny, self-aware songs about dark subject matter and depression with a sprinkling of edgy jokes. He's a guy with pretty specific thoughts and feelings about the entertainment industry, how children are shaped by their interactions with the internet, political influences on art, yet diversions away from his bread and butter are often ignored. On a smaller scale, it can be very disheartening to feel like you have a lot to say only to find a successful formula and be boxed into it. Believe it or not, as much as I love talking about murder mystery visual novels, seeing very narrow success within that genre and little else elsewhere is such an immense pressure cooker for the brain. And of course, that's not even to mention the ways in which your opinions as a public figure are amplified both positively and negatively. For some reason, people attribute more weight to your words, and suddenly you're a hero or a villain to swaths of people you've never met for what you had to say about a cartoon once. It's frightening. The more you become a concept, the more people view you like you're in a dollhouse. Your individual feelings matter very little in comparison to the entertainment you provide, and your autonomy very seldom has anything to do with that. People will literally say whatever they want about you where you can see it, and you just gotta kinda tank that. I've received genuine threats of harm from my thoughts on a piece of media before. I stumbled upon explicit artwork of me drawn without my knowledge by someone I don't know the same week that my dad passed away. And you can bet someone just rolled their eyes at me for that. Like I shouldn't find that weird or discomforting. Like anyone who makes things online brings it upon themselves just by virtue of being a public figure. And I just don't get that. I don't get why people cease being people to so many the instant they become more widely perceived. How would those people react if they were subject to the same phenomenon?
どこにもいないんだったら、私は誰?
Let me take a step back for a second, though. Let me bring this back to media, because it's a little less harrowing to confront these things through the vehicle of abstraction, right? I played a couple of games recently. They were kind of weird. I thought they were pretty good about illustrating this point, though. The Milk series, for lack of a better name, consists of 2 entries: milk inside a bag of milk inside a bag of milk, and milk outside a bag of milk outside a bag of milk. I know, we're really digging deep into the compendium of amazing titles here, aren't we? Inside a Bag of Milk is somewhat simple in its broad strokes, but still does far more than you'd expect with its meager runtime. The general gist is that the protagonist is a young woman going out for milk, and you have to help her with that. Unfortunately for her, this woman deals with both a consistent dread towards being perceived by others, and a veritable concoction of mental health issues that affect her perception, her energy, her self-worth, and even conjure extremely vivid, active hallucinations, most of which render her unable to interface with the world around her. Everything feels 9 feet tall, everything feels scary and alien, and the person at the counter staring her down when she goes to make her purchase is not really helping matters. What is that noise you are making? We find out that a lot, though not all of her trauma, has been compounded by the death of her father, an event self-inflicted and not at all of natural causes, whose circumstances are only hinted at through the visual of a gaping void, presumably through which he jumped, an active, yawning wound in the middle of her proverbial universe. Her main method of coping with her troubles is you. The player is something of a background monologue to her, the usual visual novel format text taking on a bit of a double meaning as you choose how to conduct yourself as the voice in her head. But while you can choose to be supportive, understanding, and methodical, you can also be cold and insulting, a pattern of behavior which, if you keep it up too long, will be rightly punished when the game abruptly ends with the protagonist saying that it looks like you cannot help her, and she'll need to find something else. Where its sequel comes into the picture is in following the aftermath. Just because she got home from the store doesn't mean her struggles don't just follow her there, and thus the task becomes helping her pick up her room, with a lot more exploration into her overall circumstances being offered to you. There's a lot of stuff to explore here, but in particular I want to focus on this specific scene you can get where she's falling from her balcony, and the lead up to it. This is where she opens up about an internet friendship she once had, one that she was previously uncomfortable to disclose the full details of, and what she says about it really resonated with me.
I knew, of course, that no real people exist on the web. I also understood that all of my friends die the moment I turn off my laptop, but I still wasn't even a bit worried. Do you know what computer programs consist of? It's just a combination of numbers, which means my friends are also numbers. Isn't that amusing? I mean, everyone who shares my interests is my friend, and I don't care whether they know about my existence or not. Anyways, as I was saying, every program has its own algorithm and purpose, its mathematical formula, and if you solve that formula, you'll be able to predict the program's behavior at any moment. A web person is just a random picture and a random string of letters. Words and actions from the web person are just executable code. One day, someone appeared. From that point on, my laptop was always on. There are no real people on the web, but he was good at pretending. At some moment, I let him trick me. He was brazen enough to... He somehow made me believe that he was real. He kept describing someone else's life to me in detail as if it was him, and he expected me to do the same. And then I told him everything about myself, without hiding a single thing. He knew more about me than anybody else in the world. You know what he did? Sending an army of bots to harass me was probably fun, and what's most important, it was a win-win situation. They spawn here and there, simple bits of code that are effortless to run. No wonder the algorithm assigns that pattern more often than the others from the list. Text and video generators get to work at the same time. My name surfaces on the web more and more. It's unbearable. Unbearable. From around every corner, every balcony, ceiling, attic, wall, I always feel many pairs of watchful eyes directed at me. And now they watch me from the screens, too.
Once you've been perceived, you can't be unperceived, and you can't decide how you're perceived either, you just are. But at the same time, herein lies the great contradiction of this feeling of both isolation and overwhelming observation, right? Even if it were possible for somebody, anybody, to understand you completely without fail, without error, would you really want them to? Can you say that there's anyone out there who you'd feel comfortable if they knew your every thought and feeling? Every little thing? Or do you fear what they would think? Do you fear their own individual perception? What if a comprehensive image of yourself is still displeasing to someone?
It's been about 2 months today. It's getting a little easier. At least right now it feels like it. Obviously it's something that wanes, goes in different directions with time. It's really weird to deal with the feeling of having to kind of return to mundanity when something like that happens. How do you accept things as being normal when it's kind of how all of life is? Every new experience that I go through, I find myself wanting to tell him about those things. I saw a movie today. It was really good. It's, I think you would have liked it. Certainly a lot cheerier than the movie that I'm making a video about, well, ostensibly making a video about. I've been having a lot of trouble actually writing lately. It's been kind of tough. I'm hitting a bit of a roadblock. I don't really know how exactly I want to structure this, and I keep getting kind of, not necessarily cold feet about it, but I guess I just get a little bit worried that, that it's gonna come off really rambly and weird. And I know that part of the point is that I'm trying to make something for myself that's kind of indulgent in that way, and that I don't really worry too much about what other people are gonna think about it, honestly. But I mean, you can't help but worry with those sorts of things, especially when your rent depends on it. But yeah.
You know what game I've also been thinking about again lately? Doki Doki Literature Club. I know the VN veterans are gonna toss me in a jail cell for even mentioning it, but before you rip my credibility license out of my cold, dead hands, allow me to explain why it is pertinent to my train of thought here. If you don't already know the through line of DDLC, allow me to instantly ruin it for you. Dating sim with cute girls goes creepy when one of them becomes self-aware, realizes she has no route, and is slowly driven bug nuts when she realizes there's no way to get around the game's strict scripting to be with you, even if she tries manipulating it at every turn, leading it to dissolve into a tire fire of jump scares, frantic, bloodied scribblings, and lots of death. If it sounds edgy, I mean, it is, to an extent, but at the same time, writer Dan Salvato cracked into a few things here I find very interesting. Namely within the motivations of the principal antagonist, Monica. You see, just calling her a yandere for the player would be pretty drastically underselling what I find to be her real driving motivation, which is a desire for genuine connection. Monica's self-aware streak comes with not only the realization of her world's artifice, but the fact that its artifice necessitates it to be on rails. Also, the fact that you are her only peek into what she considers to be the real world. How often do you see people say they like a celebrity or their work because they seem so genuine, not performative, etc.? In a sense, these people are all seeking something not unlike what Monica wants out of this little arrangement. She's so disenchanted being strung along by a world which seems content only to smother her with its rehearsed nature that even a shred of what she considers to be grounded reality is worth killing over. She even pokes fun at this in one of her endless classroom conversation topics with you, where she talks about the very anime character tropes inherent to so many dating sims. The bratty tsundere, the stammering shy girl. She chalks these up to near hyper-realized exaggerations of human behavior, fantasies that at a certain point cease to reflect reality in any way. And then she asks if people really find these tropes attractive because of how detached they are from what she considers to be realistic. What Monica sort of fails to realize here, though, is that she's sort of already doomed from the start in this respect. No matter how hard she tries, the inherent barrier between her and you is going to mean that necessarily she'll never be able to learn everything about you. Even the desirable aspect of you to her, your genuineness, is something she can only loosely perceive and ascribe her own meaning to. She literally admits that she knows very little about you, down to not even knowing your real name or your gender. But that simple idea that you're real is enough to push her over the edge. You're her escape, at least she hopes you are. But in the end, you can't be. The only way you can respond to her devotion is with distance. A distance she at first feels enormously betrayed by, but then comes to accept. It's just like the lyrics of the game's ending song say. And in your reality, if I don't know how to love you, I'll leave you be. And I guess that's what it's all about in the end, isn't it? Respectable distance. There are plenty of people whose work I admire and respect, yet I'll never claim to know everything about them and their lives, nor will I presume to have some sort of ownership over it. If I follow a YouTuber with a beard, I'm not gonna blow my lid if they shave it. I say this because it is an actual example of something I've seen happen. More than once. I will admit that I don't know everything about them, and in the end, I think it's better that way. Similarly, while I'm sure all of us wish we were understood better sometimes, and we could probably do a better job of offering a bit more of an attempt at understanding others, it's also important to realize that we're not necessarily responsible for the myriad of ways other people will see us. We literally cannot change or control that, and all we can do is what we feel it in our hearts to do. You want that career change? Go for it. You want to do something different with your life? Knock yourself out. If you feel like completely remaking yourself from the ground up, I wish you the good fortune to be reborn as many times as you like, because God knows I have needed the same affordance again and again. Nobody owns you, not even if you've made yourself feel like they do. But at the same time, we need to be mindful of the gap. We have to know when it's gotten a bit too wide, and we need to be observant of it. Every number on your screen is, whether you can process it or not, a person. Okay, well, that's not a person, but you know what I mean. And whether or not you can engage with all of them notwithstanding, I still think it's important to remember that they are one. One of the most well-known clips ever uploaded by one of this site's most popular creators has him crying because he realized in that moment that his following was so large that he wouldn't possibly be able to engage with all of them on a personal level. And I genuinely sympathize with that feeling. From the beginning of this channel, I have also strove to impart my thoughts and feelings on things I care about in a way that, even if it was always my own subjective opinion, could connect with others and afford them the respect of coming to their own conclusions alongside me. By that same metric, I've always tried to remain fairly active within my own comments, encouraging discussion, even participating in some of it myself. But more and more now, I too have realized that my ability to do so has been slowly eroded by the sheer scope. And that's a tough pill to swallow. Sometimes I really do feel like that gap has widened too much, and I'm not really sure how to feel about it. And then I look at Mima, brilliant despite her fears, confident in her own self, her own wants, and her own path in life. Regardless of what anyone sees her as, she's not their angelic idol, she's not ruined, she is, bluntly put, real. And my greatest wish in life is that you, yes, you, can look yourself in the mirror and be able to say the same. I'm real. Hi. So I'm getting to the very end of making this video, I think, and it kind of didn't turn out like I thought it would. In all honesty, I was expecting going into this that it would be a lot more of a vent. And I mean, it definitely still is, but less of one than I anticipated. And I don't know, I get a strange sense of kind of like relief from that, I think. I went into this a little bit more aimlessly, a little bit more disenchanted with the entire state of my life. And don't get me wrong, in those intervening months, some shit has gotten really bad. But as far as that specific feeling, I think I'm kind of easing up. I guess in a way I kind of managed to get it all out of me. Well, maybe not all out of me, but these things are pretty unpredictable, honestly. Moods change. But at least right now, I feel pretty good about this. I think I did a good job. Trying to let myself internalize that a little bit more often these days. Instead of just focusing on all the things that I wish I'd done differently, or like, oh, I wish it turned out more like this. Just gotta let the video be the video, you know? And I think that for what it's worth, the video turned out in a way that I'm happy with. It will be over in a few minutes, so thanks for watching it. Far be it from me to say nothing on the net holds any weight, of course. In fact, year after year, that becomes less and less accurate to say. But while the internet certainly grows in consequence over time, the importance of getting out there is still one that ranks high on my list. Meet new people, be among those who can't just look you in the eye and recognize you. Have one-off conversations, go to places you've never seen. Do a whole lot of living on the outside, because boy does it suck to be stuck inside. And they can coexist, of course, they have to. But it's nice. dwelling outside the panopticon, isn't it? And to me, I guess that's what Perfect Blue got me thinking about. It's a brilliant movie, and while I think it's certainly got elements worth discussing critically, I still think its artistic chops are solidly speaking about something critical. It sucker punched me so hard at such a sensitive moment that I don't think I was ever going to end up making a very normal video about it. But if the record of my scriptwriting process of this thing should be evidence of anything, it's that sometimes the greatest catharsis lies in getting to kind of freak the f out about it all for a while. Perhaps that's an exercise in vulnerability that invites an equal amount of misunderstanding as it does the opposite. But, well, isn't that just the way of things? I'm sure plenty of you probably got it, and if you didn't, well, that's okay too, because this was for me.
How fun was it inside anyways?
It was pretty stuffy.
Hi. Sorry this one took so long, even though it's not so long, frankly. Scripting this was monumentally difficult and kind of went through several different iterations in my mind over the course of 7 months, because my mood has been rapidly flying all over the place. It's almost like I've been through some things lately or something. In any case, I think I'm ultimately happy with where this landed, even if it's not quite as grandiose as I initially envisioned. Sometimes it's better for miserable ruminations to land on a little bit of a hopeful note, and loath as I am to say it after all of that, I guess that is kind of my brand. Speaking of my brand, I hear it thrives when you like, comment, and subscribe or something. I say this with all the enthusiasm of someone with a gun to their head, but please believe me when I say I do very much appreciate it when people do that, especially because I have little expectation for the YouTube algorithm to be especially kind to a weird little video like this. So, you know, it needs all the help it can get. And speaking of help, I've got a Patreon where you can give me some of that if you'd like some rewards in exchange, namely access to my patrons-only Discord server, some previews of upcoming stuff, and even some exclusive little bonus videos where I gush about things I know YouTube would probably beat me with a lead pipe for, like an entire 20-minute video about my favorite title screen music in a video game. If you prefer your support a little different or more one-time, you can also become a YouTube member with the little join button below the video, which will net you access to some fun little chat emojis for my premieres and streams, or you can give money via Ko-fi, also linked in the description. Also, yes, I did say streams. I'm something of a streamer, I guess. I stream about twice weekly, usually going through chunky text-heavy games and voice acting my way through them. I just recently finished my very first ever playthrough of the 5th Ace Attorney game, so if you're curious to see me develop gay lawyer brainworms in real time, those should be a hoot for you. Go to my live tab or my playlists tab to find those and swing by when I'm live. The gang would probably love to have you. But now I've got to give my props to the people who support me, such as Cyberling420, Serena Midori, Shogun DX, Friend of Dracula, Ali Oliver, Claire Meeboon, Bailey, Noel Hadley, Joseph Adams, Weecon, MJL, Lord Omega 12, Stage Lights, White Toast, Lay Fam, T, Saxon, 16 Crows in a Trench Coat, Cass Reed, Indigo, Horsefry, CJ the Magic Goose, Niche Fish, JS, Phantom Falcon, Sad Boy Alert, Space Battery, Moiba Alsue, Big Yellow, Digimaniac 33, Sable Cowl, D-Bear, Elaine Allfelt, Queen Elzyme, Deviant Witch, Zero Enderborn, Bank Pads, Clovercool, Noah, Me Substitution, Everett Neely, Luna, Jane Yarley, Matt Hop, Jeff Ladd, Torterra 454, Seditious, Junepop45, Svinderace, Jordan Finch, Demi Bourbon, and Kev Worst. Thank you so much for waiting, as always, everyone. I hope this little exploration of Perfect Blue and several other things it made me think about was enjoyable, even if my brain was actively melting out of my ears while I wrote it. I hope to see you again for whatever I do next, so until then, see you later. Peace.